Mathematical models for better food crops. Welcome to Mark and Pete. Do you want drought-proof wheat? Do you desire disease-resistant rice? Well, maybe you can have it. Welcome to Mark and Pete, two blokes with half an opinion. Now, here's our first thought.
The roots of a mathematical world. What is the square root of a tomato? Should it be calculated with every grain? What factors make the power of a potato? And is it something which you can train? What is the logarithm of a leek? Is it something that's easy to explain? If you know the calculus of a cucumber, the probability is you've a vegetable for a brain. Yes. Well,
Yeah.
the fact is that that may be so. Mathematics, it's something that some people find difficult. Well, not so the researchers that are happening now, where mathematical models are being identified to be able to create genetic material that could improve the food crop's resilience to climate change. Yes, this is the idea that mathematical models can impact areas such as drought, pest, and disease. Mr. Pete, well, I know that you're reasonably good at mathematics, and you've certainly taught that in lessons at school. But
Mhm.
let me ask you, this certainly is a great advancement for science.
Yes, Mr. Mark. The thing is, well, let me just quote the Bible straight at the outset. Genesis 2, verse 15. The Lord God took man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and keep it. It is a biblical mandate for us to farm well and to produce good crops. Um, there are ethical concerns, it is said, over not over using maths to look at the genome being the genetic material that defines what the particular organism is like. It's not that we use mathematics to define it; it's that we then manipulate it, changing God's design. People would say.
Yes.
However, the reason that I don't have a problem with it, even as a Christian, is this: we've been doing that all the time for many years without this sort of moral outrage by selective breeding. It's the same thing happening. It's just that it's happening in a different way and uh, and at a more extreme. You could do something more extreme, but what you can do actually is something more precise and targeted, and that's why it's a good thing. The math, if you've got a mathematical model of the genome, which is going to show, this particular alteration in the genome is going to produce more resistance to, for example, flooding. Now, if you believe you've got a good reason to believe there is going to be more flooding in the future, and certain climate change models do indicate this, then you'll want that put in place, won't you? So I think this is one of those, I suppose, increasingly few occasions here on Mark and Pete or any media when what we've got is really a good news story.
Yes, remarkably. Now, there was a recent workshop that took place in Morocco. Leading mathematicians and crop scientists all met together to discuss that applied mathematics could be used to speed up the research through agricultural gene banks for climate change resistance traits. And this is something which is, as you say, is an incredibly good news story. As we know that there are many parts of the world that are suffering from dry areas, maybe there's the persistent water scarcity, and those
Yeah.
drought areas could need as much science as possible to rectify this problem. What I would say with this is that, to me, I just wonder why it's taken so long to get to this stage. And I think it's really more about the fact that more and more regions throughout the world are suffering from droughts, or whether they are suffering from pests and diseases. So I think that what we can also say is, and this is not to skew the conversation, but artificial intelligence is making a big difference here because it can accelerate the process of mathematical models. And this is where I think the combination between the practical, that's those who are basically farmers out in the land, working the land, who bring their knowledge, and mathematicians mathematicians who could bring their models and their learnings together, but also technology can come together. And I think that this is a good thing. Now, I'm not saying, and of course, we're definitely not saying that we're going to see the eradication of famine around the world or drought, etc. But this is a good measure. So, Mr. Pete, I ask, when you think about the world around us, this could be a good example of a positive story for the 21st century, where really many people are sort of seeing conflict
Mm. Yes.
on the plate.
Yeah, they do see that. People, it's almost as though when you get a scientific advance, it's what is the phrase? Looking the gift horse in the mouth. You look at it, you think, "Oh, no, we don't want that." There's always seem to come up with a reason to be very creative in coming up with reasons why it's not good news. Now, there have been problems with manipulating genetically the crops, and
Yeah,
you can become a cropper, as you might say,
definitely.
if you do that, because you can end up with crops that are maybe growing out of size, or maybe doing something strange that you don't realize. I mean, that you don't realize because you haven't tried it out. But what if you do try it out? What if you
Yes.
actually do scientifically test it and then it's released out into the farms across the world, which I think is what's being planned to do. I think people are putting boundaries in the way when using these sort of mathematical models can simply help you to identify how to produce better crops. I know it's genetically modifying, but genetically modified just is a scary sounding phrase. I don't think that it's a scary, especially if done, with safeguards in place, like I just said, testing first. As it sounds, it's in another field of science. The word radioactivity is seen as
Yeah.
dangerous, whereas famously, bananas have radioactivity in them, and yet people eat them all the time. And so, they you could actually check where your bananas are with a Geiger counter, and yet
Yeah.
people still eat them. So I think it's false to say that this is just scary. This is actually, as you say, a good news story. And because you can have a mathematical model predicting what's going to happen, here's what's going to happen if you change the genome. Here's the good thing about it. It means that you can look for different things to change depending on the environment. There's flexibility. And it may be that you get more drought because things get too hot. It may be that you get more flooding because of the changes in the weather because of climate change. You're getting flash floods from the rain. But it may be that in fact it gets too cold and you need your crops to be resistant to cold. Just remembering that a lot of our listeners will be skeptical about the fact that we're going to continue having a warming globe. Well, what if it's cooling? That's going to cause big problems unless you have in place a way to change the resistance of your crops. Of course, there'll be a limit to it, but at least you've got some way of keeping the level of access to food available for longer. So all in all, it is a good news story. Let's not just throw it away. Let's promote it. And as Christians, we should be all the more in favour of this.
Well, indeed, and in fact, well, this is really a big lesson for everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're at school, whether you're in business, etc. Maths really makes a difference, doesn't it? And so too does science. In fact, the University of Aston University, and you'll be familiar with that, Mr. Pete,
Yep, yep.
basically have said that people who struggle with maths obviously have to think of it in a different way. There's often a fear of maths. Bad experiences with maths can lead to the brain associating maths with pain. So the regions of the brain associated with pain processing can be activated when thinking about maths. Now, this thinking only occurs when thinking about maths because it doesn't occur when the brain is actually doing maths. So the point being here is that this is a great thing. Start to use mathematics in a positive way. And Mr. Pete, I know that you would encourage that to people who are going in education and also
Yeah.
in business and many other places. But really, as far as I'm concerned, when we look at mathematics overall, this is really the route to all productivity. And let's call out to all those scientists because at the end of the day, they are the cream of the crop.